Welcome, everybody. It's good to have you all here joining us this evening. Our second lesson of the Conchas y Café Fall 2024 series has begun. So I want to say, thank you for joining in. And anybody who is on our live streams, you're more than welcome to drop a question in your chat, depending on which live stream you are watching on, whether that be Instagram Live, Facebook Live, or YouTube Live. Those of you here on Zoom, thank you for being here tonight. Of course, Sam is going to be taking over as our host for tonight. I'll be kind of lingering in the back. I'll be answering questions in the chat if in case anyone has questions there. But of course, feel free to raise your hands if you have any questions as Sam explains away the very famous hero's journey. So with that, I will pass it off to Sam. Thank you, Sam, for doing all the hard work this week. And the mic is yours, my friend.
Awesome. You're facilitating tonight's session, participating with you guys. The hero's journey is a really well-known concept and something that I chose because it just made a lot of sense with this season's theme, Los Caminos de la Vida, and the hero's journey being about both an inward journey, a psychological journey of self-discovery, and an outward journey of facing struggles and obstacles on one's path toward just maturity and attaining self-actualization, realizing your destiny. We all live a personal myth, and it's kind of our own responsibility to discover what our personal myth is. So let me go ahead and start the screen share, and we'll get into it. Can everybody see that okay? Yeah?
Yeah.
Thumbs
Yeah,
up?
okay.
All right, cool. All right, guys. This is definitely a very kind of detailed concept. There's a lot of parts to it, but I will do my very best to make it manageable and just fun and relatable. It's definitely something that will aid writers, on their own journeys, whatever level you're at, whatever stage of the writing life you're in. This is useful to kind of help you not only push through maybe like writer's block and challenges, but also to do some introspective work. What is it that calls you to writing, and what does your own writer's journey look like through the lens of the hero's journey? We're all heroes or heroines in our own lives as we kind of steer ourselves through life's many trials and tests. Okay, so with that, I'll just start off with the quote by a man named Joseph Campbell, who's very famous and who actually invented the concept of the hero's journey. Does anybody want to read it? Or do you guys want me to just go ahead and read it? Any volunteers to want to read it?
The journey of the hero is about the courage to seek the depths, the image of creative rebirth, the eternal cycle of change within us, the uncanny discovery that the seeker is the mystery which the seeker seeks to know. The hero journey is a symbol that binds. In the original sense of the word, two distant ideas, the spiritual quest of the ancients with the modern search for identity. Always the one shape-shifting yet marvelously constant story that we find.
Thank you for reading for us. That was great. So just to kind of give you an idea, you guys, of what this hero's journey is all about, the language here seems a little maybe spiritual or esoteric, but I promise you that this is something that can relate and does show up in our daily lives. I actually have an example of of how it's shown up in my own life that I'll share at the end if we have time, and I'd love to hear yours as we advance here. So Joseph Campbell, like as I said, he was a very prolific, very famous in his lifetime American writer and professor of literature. Born in 1904, passed away in 1987. Best known for his book, The Hero with a Thousand Faces, published in 1949. And that's the book that discusses this idea of the hero's journey. And it's basically an archetypal story, which means that it exists. Archetypal just is a fancy way of saying it exists deep in our minds, deep in our subconscious and our collective unconscious. stories that are shared universally throughout the world's cultures and mythologies. That's the hero's journey, and that's what Joseph Campbell identified in his scholarly studies, is that there was a recurring story, a pattern he saw throughout the world's cultures in which the same kind of phases seems to happen or seem to take place or were present. Okay, so with that in mind, do you guys have your favorite narratives or stories that yeah, so if you guys want to take a minute to share with me, what are your favorite narratives, stories, from real life or from fiction? How do they begin? What triggers or triggered that journey to start? If anybody wants to just jump in and shoot, what are some of your favorite stories? How does those stories start? Anybody at all? Or if you want to respond to the quote, what is the quote kind of like? What catches your eye in this quote? Anything that stands out kind
We
of.
have Julie. I think she raised her hand.
Okay, for Julie.
One of my favorite books is The Trial. And the main protagonist, he's kind of like the hero, but he's also the one that gets trashed quite often throughout the whole book and the whole story. And it doesn't end like with a happy ending. But was he a hero throughout all of these sort of trials that he had to go through to like exist as a human being? I mean, it's kind of I guess debatable, but I kind of kept rooting for him throughout the book. So that's kind of why he became a little bit of a hero to me, even though he wasn't really a hero.
Can you tell us how the story for him starts? What calls him onto that journey, if you remember?
I think he was, yeah, it's been a while since I read the book.
That's okay.
Yeah, he got arrested, and he was trying to navigate the penal and law system, and it was just like this giant labyrinth that he couldn't get through it. It's kind of like what life is like, just bureaucracy that we have to get through, and sometimes you can never get past it. So
would you say that the hero or this main character's protagonist was different at the end of the story or the same?
Oh, he was completely different. He was like a normal guy at the beginning of the story, like a regular guy. He was like an architect or somebody, he had a regular good job. And then somehow he got on a bad list and they arrested him, and he ended up in this, and he was totally innocent, but he ended up in this giant labyrinth of bureaucracy that he couldn't get out of. And it was just sad. And also I just kept rooting for him. I couldn't stop rooting for the guy.
If you're rooting for him, chances are that he probably has the makings of a hero in him, or at least heroic qualities. And thank you for sharing that, because it just goes to the point of the hero's journey being transformative. We are not the same person that we are at the beginning of the journey, who we become by the end of it. And if we look here at the quote, the part where it says, the spiritual quest of the ancients with modern search for identity. So in all of the stories that you could possibly think of in like modern media, you can see that you may notice that characters are dealing with things on a psychological and emotional level. And from there, we can extrapolate that there's something spiritual going on. Everybody, every protagonist, every person, fictional and real life, is searching for something. We're all on a quest. There is something that we need to do in life, with our lives, a sense of destiny and purpose that kind of exists on the spiritual plane. And that dovetails with that modern need for an identity, for something to relate to, a quest, a purpose. Does anybody want to comment on that quote, another part of it or that same part that I'm tapping into?
We do have a comment in the chat from Tori. Tori wrote, I like narrative stories because they are usually conversational, so it is simple for me to understand and it is often relatable. For example, I like stories by Jack Kerouac, and I like narrative poems because they read like short stories. Usually, some themes are challenges. Uh,
That
Usually, some themes are challenges that everyday people have. I like to find that relation and see how they navigate through it. They, meaning the speaker of the poem or the story.
That's great, Tori. And I think you're definitely tapping into the hero's journey when you're enjoying those aspects of the short stories that you like, and like Baruch's work or narrative poems. Because the main idea there is that there's challenges, and those challenges are what make up the journey. It's what causes there to be action, change, a transformation in the protagonist that as you read, you may notice as you're reading through those works. I like that you mentioned how they navigate, because that's also a central part to the hero's journey, is the way in which the hero navigates the challenges, or in this case, the speaker of the works that you're reading. How do they navigate the challenges that appear before them in these stories or in the poems, what's presented? So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. We also had a comment on Instagram saying, I like narratives too, especially working class narratives, which I think is maybe a good follow-up question for you, Sam. How would you define a narrative?
I would define a narrative as a story that is imbued with struggle, with change, with challenges, that reveals to us what the speaker of the narrative is like, who they are. It's something that reveals to us who the person the story is about, or the people that the story is about, who they are, what kind of people they are, what are they made of, what is this protagonist made of, who are they, what ideas do they represent, what values do they embody. And it doesn't have to be something grand and heroic either. Everyday people, at least in my personal opinion and from what I've seen, are capable of doing some of the most incredible things. I mean, we can think of our parents, if you're the children of immigrants, which I'm sure that resonates here in this space. Our parents are everyday heroes, for the sacrifices that they make to raise us, or the sacrifices they have made to raise us. Working class parents in particular. My folks are working class immigrant folks who, for me, are just comparable to the heroes of legend for the efforts they put into raising me in the community that I grew up in. So yeah, in a nutshell, a narrative is a story. A narrative is a story that tells us about a person or a particular group of people and what values they represent and how those values appear through the struggles that they experience, which reveals their character. Alrighty. Guys, anything else? Any comments? Any ideas about this opening quote before we move on?
We got a
Or if anyone.
Abraham.
Yeah, and I see this quote, and it basically tells us the story of this Joseph Campbell and his quest to find the quest, right? Like how he searches in ancient stories and then sees it repeating, right? A pattern of also telling a story. How you tell a story, how do you tell the story about the people who is listening to the story that comes back to us in the present day, and we are still using those same things because they're important to us. In this case, the hero, right? Like, because we cherish heroes, we use them as examples of who we want to be, right? And these things come along with other pieces, like other characters that we're gonna be probably talking about, right? And all the things that carry us towards the future or towards a goal, right?
Correct. All of this comes to us in this day and age because it's what we've inherited through the many cultures of the world and what we've inherited through world literature as stories that matter to us. Fundamentally, the stories about love, death, struggle, heroism are things that human beings decided at some point were worthy of preservation, and were the kind of stories that would help communities to deal with challenges, whatever those challenges may be. And we'll get there, but the very first stage of the hero's journey presents us with, in a very kind of general sense, a problem. There's a problem for a community. It doesn't matter. It could be at any stage in time, in any place. A community somewhere in some place is going through hardship, a drought. Maybe they're being invaded by their neighbors. Anything. It could be anything. And the hero is a person within that community, and there could be more than one, who rises up and is brave enough, or maybe they're not brave at first, but they're willing to, or unwilling to, but they find the strength as they go forward to discover a resolution, something to help the community. So there's many facets to the hero's journey that tap into many different parts of human experience, and which are valuable for us to study as people, just everyday people, and as writers, because it'll teach us how to tell a compelling story. It's like training wheels. Okay. So
A hand raised from Dr. Rosie.
Dr. Rosie, go for it.
Hi.
Okay.
Hello. If you could bring back that quote, I just wanted to just point out something that I think is one of the most important lines that we're bringing up in different ways, Sam and everyone. It's the fact of the eternal cycle of change within us. So emotionally, we change, every day, every week, every month, and as we're writing, our writing is going to change. And so that's the whole thing of, that eternal cycle of change and how we think and what we produce. You could start off with one idea and end up with a whole different idea later on, but it's still yours. It's your eternal cycle of your changes and what you do with it. And that to me, it's like that rhythm that ties in. It's like the waves of the ocean, and so that to me is a very important line that I think we need to consider when we're writing and how we're expressing.
Thank you so much for pointing that out, Dr. Rosie. You're right. I feel like this quote, every line of it contains some aspect of the hero's journey that's fundamental to the journey, to the process, that taps into at least one of the stages, if not the whole cycle overall, as we'll see once we move forward. But there is this idea of eternal return. The hero is going to complete this journey, go through all the phases, emerge as transformed and fully realized as the hero that's always been within them. And then the cycle starts over again. It may or may not, but the point is exactly what you're saying. There's seasons because it's life. Life keeps moving. Los caminos solo terminan cuando ya no hay vida. Y aún después hay otros que vienen. There's others who come, other generations who continue the cycle. Thank you so much for pointing that part out. That's a very central part of it, is this idea of eternal return. It's one big wheel that keeps spinning, if not for, one hero who is mortal, for the generations that come, and the cycle in that sense is immortal.
Right. And if you think about it within our families, growing up in our families, a lot of us repeat what our parents did and what the ancestors did before that. It's that whole repetitive cycle, but then we individually internalize it in ourselves as we go through our whatever changes. And that's what makes it the beautiful work of writing that we do.
Ándale. And this idea of hero's journey is so rich. There's so many different interpretive lenses that you can analyze it with. The psychological lens, the cultural lens, un poquito de todo, the mythological lens, fictional, as far as like how to craft a good story is. You can borrow from it as well at stages. There's a deep richness to this. Think of it as a well that you can tap into on many layers. Okay, guys, if nobody else wants to share about the quote, or that's okay. We can just keep moving forward, and there will be more opportunities. But no, just for the sake of time, let's just kind of move on here. Okay, so the hero's journey, as I was saying earlier, it's an archetypal, meaning it exists in our minds. According to Jungian theories, the archetypes, we won't get into that too much. It's storytelling structure that's as old as humanity itself and just as diverse. The term comes from Joseph Campbell, who I mentioned before. He studied and compiled thousands of hero myths from various cultures throughout the world that he compiled into that book, The Hero with a Thousand Faces. And you guys are probably more than likely already familiar with some popular fictional stories that, use this storytelling structure. I'm sure that these are going to ring a bell. We have Star Wars, we got Harry Potter, The Hunger Games, Lord of the Rings. Does that bring up anything for you guys? You kind of maybe see any connections between that quote that we started with and some of these more popular and well-known stories in pop culture? Anybody?
Yes. I mean, I think I've seen them all.
Most of us probably have.
They're wonderful, when I see repeats.
Yeah, they get remade too. The new Star Wars
Yes.
trilogy. Yeah.
Is there another movie I haven't seen any of those. I don't
Oh, that's all right. Yeah, there's a ton. There's a ton. They're just the ones that I thought of off the top of my head, and the Hunger Games is otro. What's one of your favorite stories? Either fictional, movie, or book that you read.
That has to do with heroes?
I mean, you'd be surprised. They're kind of everywhere. It's a huge part of our popular culture.
Oh, The Daughter of a Fortune. That's a good one.
Tell us about that a little bit. Why do you like that?
This girl that came over chasing a boy, that he came on a ship to United States from Spain, and she ended up not having like the life that she thought she would. But I think it's the story of Joaquin Murrieta, or he was the boy that she was chasing.
Famous bandit, del California.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that was a good one. But I'm trying to think of a movie.
Well, we can start with the book. That one definitely sounds heroic. Don't you think so? I mean, if you think about a young woman crossing the ocean to another continent to chase someone she loves, that sounds pretty damn heroic to me.
She's crazy. Yeah.
I mean, un poquito de locura for sure, but that's life. La vida a veces nos presenta con retos y dificultades. Tenemos deseos porque somos humanos. We have human desires that propel us, sometimes to do things that are risky, but it's part of our own personal journey, our own personal mythology. Each person has it. Fictional characters and real life people. We all have a journey that we're on. And without getting too esoteric about that, it helps us to grow. Life is full of challenges. And the hero's journey basically takes all of those theoretical and real life challenges that human beings face, and it kind of condenses it into a structure that you can study. But yeah, that story that you brought up, The Daughter of a Fortune, definitely I can see at least aspects of the hero or heroine's journey in that. Definitely.
Yeah, it did. Okay.
In the chat, we have a I guess suggestion from Julie of the Carlos Castaneda books, and then on Instagram, someone also gave an example of the Fast and Furious movie series.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh,
and
wow.
then we also have a hand raised from San Juanita.
Okay, let's address the comments from the folks, and then we'll give the floor to San Juanita. I hope that's okay. Fast and the Furious. Okay, here's my philosophy, guys. And I've held on to this ever since my high school English classes. I had an amazing English teacher, Miss Kavinsky, and one nugget of wisdom I've held on to from her all these years is that everything is an argument. So while I'm not inclined right away to say, Fast and the Furious hero's journey, or there may be people who think, that's too commercial, I would say I would entertain it. If you can argue it and you can make that point using the hero's journey and what we're going to learn here, by all means, that's what I'm about in this class. Everything is an argument, and as long as you can prove your points about the Fast and the Furious, and I would say I would give you the benefit of the doubt, a todo dar. More power to you, because I believe that it's at least some aspects of it are there, if not the whole thing. And Carlos Castaneda, well, I read some. I haven't read all of the books, but it definitely goes into the idea of a spiritual journey, which is certainly part of the hero's journey. That one's a little easier to kind of argue. Yes, There's a spiritual journey that the elder in some of Castaneda's books is initiating the protagonist into, because he's an outsider who is learning the ways of this shamanic elder in order to change from being a regular everyday person into someone who has acquired the specialized knowledge of the shaman in some of Castaneda's books. And then go ahead, Juanita, or is yours?
So, I'm here listening, so you're asking if we know any other story that follows the hero's journey. However,
either that, and Juanita, or just what one of your favorite stories is.
Okay, so what I was gonna say actually is that I am an English teacher, and you know what we taught since I was in school, the introduction, body, not the body, the climax, the falling action, and all that, and then I learned about the hero's journey, which was a very convincing way of actually telling a narrative, because that's when I was taking a class, one of my writing classes, because I take other writing classes, and this is where I learned about it. That when you are telling a story, the protagonist is going to undergo some change, whatever type of change. So I strongly believe that this is one way, in fact, a better way for me, since I started using it to tell a story. And I see that the majority of movies, the majority of stories, any story, that's really what it follows. The person is nonchalantly just sitting there, and suddenly something comes, and then goes out there, and then follows the entire cycle of goes through through the whole cycle, and when it comes up here, there's a resolution. So basically, I do believe that the majority of the stories that I've read, that's what they follow, and no matter what. And I was thinking of the Daughter of Fortune, of course, yeah, definitely. The Isabel Allende, they are.
Yeah,
any story I can think of follows the hero's journey, the whole cycle. And in fact, that's how I started writing, thinking of the hero's journey. I started doing my stories based on that. Not necessarily that the rising action, falling action doesn't work, but it's a new way. And I thought it was even better for me, because I was able to tell the story a lot better than with the other way. So I just wanted to, bring that up. And it has definitely helped me, to tell the story, and to tell the story by using all the different points, of the cycle of the hero. So just wanted to share that.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I agree. I think it's a great method of learning how to tell a story. And there's something to be said once we've mastered it, once we've really learned it, because, and I'll get into this more later in the class, but I like the metaphor of martial arts. Once you master something, once you master a form, or even writing, once you master a writing style, horror writing, fantasy writing, whatever it is, romance writing, once you master the rules, you can break them. But I'll get into that later. Let's take a look at the cycle, guys. We've been having a great discussion about the hero's journey so far. Let's take some time now to look at what it actually looks like. Definitely appreciating here visual metaphor, a circle, a cycle, something cyclical. Let's go through the stages really quick. We'll go into them in depth in the next slide. And I just kind of want to get your impressions about what you guys think of just looking at it visually. So we have the start. Aquí está el monito. Adventure, inicio de aventura. We go into meeting a mentor, conoce al maestro, and then crossing the threshold. This is like cutting the circle in half, slicing up right in the middle, del umbral. And then we enter into trials and failures, pruebas y derrotas. Híjole. introduce introducción de aliados, new skills acquired. We level up. You know, if you're in like a video game, if you like video games, you get to the next level. You know, your character gets stronger. New skills acquired. Nuevas habilidades. You know, something that the hero or heroine may not have been capable of doing before, they're able to do in that moment. If we think about Mulan, if you guys have seen the Disney animated, you know, really famous Mulan, she starts training with the army, and there's that challenge of climbing the pole with the two heavy, they're like metal bands that she has to wrap together in order to climb the pole. At first, she can't do it, and she gets so dispirited. But when she gets this new skills acquired, after doing the training and going through it all, it's brutal. She's able to finally climb to the top. No one else could. And then the captain of you know, the training shows up, and everybody's stunned. They all get up and they see her at 6 a.m. in the morning. She's done it. The first one to like throw the arrow back down from the top and retrieve the captain's arrow. But anyway, death and rebirth. It's like it's right halfway through. Revelations, revelaciones, accept change, accept el cambio. Then we have atonement, desagravio, que es the gift, recibe el regalo. We're going back up for air. We're reaching the surface of this metaphorical ocean. Are complete, el fin. And this is kind of a simplified version, but we'll get into it. Impressions, guys. What does it bring up for you guys, just looking at it visually?
Without looking at the words, just focusing on the circle, because
Yes.
I'm thinking of the moon.
I like that. Phases. The moon has phases, right? It's constantly moving. It's got a different face every time. Yeah, I love that. Great work, Chignawi. Yeah. ¿Alguien más por ahí que se atreva? No, two stakes here, guys. You know, it's just curious to see how the visual, like we've seen a lot of text so far. We're going to see more text. I'm just curious. That's all, you know. Todo se vale aquí. Everything is valuable here. Any input?
I think it looks like a light bulb. But I like
that too. Yeah.
But I like it because I feel like in order to become a hero, you gotta have light bulbs constantly going off, especially when you get to that trials and errors. You gotta keep thinking, all right, what can I do? How do I do it? Like ding, 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 ding.
Yes. Oh man, that's great that you said that. That's one that I hadn't even thought of. You're right. It's like being aware of every stage. And in order to get to the next stage, as real life people, and when we're reading fiction, you'll notice the characters, something triggers them to become aware of the next stage that they have to progress to, or the action they have to take to get to the next stage. That was lovely. Thank you for sharing that. Abraham?
Well, I think it's important to know that there's always a challenge or something that, like Mulan, you cannot climb something, right? That's something that's going to be the stopping point for a regular person or the character itself. And then there has to be a change. This is the whole thing, right? Nothing can be stationary in this type of narrative. This change, and the change happens because that obstacle needs you to grow or to have that rebirth, as the cycle says here, right? And this is when you have to change a certain way in order to become something new that's able to overcome such obstacle. And from there, you become the new person. And the cycle is because there's always some new wall, right? There's always going to be a new mountain, right? There's always going to be a new story in the terms of the bigger picture, right? So the change is always there. So that's kind of where the cycle comes into play.
Definitely. And I believe it was Dr. Rosie, forgive me if I'm wrong, but who brought up the idea of it never ending. It's cyclical. And we're getting to that. And yes, the hero's journey, right, it's just theoretical. We're looking at this, it's a diagram, it's theory, but it is based on real life. And in real life, it's never just, we never just do one loop around the circle. It's many. You could think of every year of your life as a hero's journey, or even every month. Que sé yo. Maybe in a day, you're like, damn, I had a rough day. Híjole, I slew 1,000,000 dragons, and, you know, I discovered the treasure at the bottom of the well. Caray. I've aged like 10 years. Sometimes we have days like that, right?
Okay, yeah, but also, you know, to add to, you know, what you're saying, Sam, is that right away, immediately, there's a meeting with a mentor. And following that, once you cross the threshold, there's some help. That's so it's almost reminds me of the fact that we're the journey that we create or we go through. There's always someone there, like when you go back to your a parent or abuelita or someone for consejos, or you're listening to these consejos, and or someone that's actually gonna mentor you, but it's almost like you're never alone, even though you may be doing this this journey on your own, but you're never alone. It just seems that way.
Wonderful comment. Wonderful comment, Dr. Rosie. Very true. In all of the stories that that one may consider, either popular fiction, hey, maybe even the Fast and the Furious, there's always someone there that helps the main character, the protagonist, the potential hero or heroine, get started. And if we think about our own lives, I'm sure that everyone has had at least one, several even pivotal people at different junctures, critical junctures in your life, that gave you a leg up, that helped you out, cut you some slack, or gave you the nugget of wisdom that you needed to get to the next stage in your own growth. Go ahead, Jessica. The floor is yours. Tienes la palabra.
I just want to see after Dr. Rosie what she said. I think even in between the start from call to adventure and meeting a mentor, there's even like a little small part in the hero's journey that's this is just for lack of a better word, but like surrendering that you need somebody, whether it's like a higher power, a friend, but like that in itself is like heroic to like admit, okay, I need somebody, community, a mentor, God, whomever you want to put in that little box. But there's something that has to happen between the start and meeting the mentor before you can even get there. Like this little heroic spot in a hero's journey is just surrendering to the fact that they need.
Oh man, y'all are killing it. Y'all are killing it. Yes, surrender is a huge part of this cycle, because as we know from our own life experiences, sometimes life just happens. There's forces beyond our control that when we consider that in terms of the hero's journey, the hero must surrender to in order to advance the journey. Otherwise, they stay the same. They don't grow. Growth is it stagnates. The journey doesn't start. It's like a car that just won't shoot, that won't start. So yes, definitely a huge part of it, Jessica, is surrender. And we'll get into the stages and the specifics, but I definitely want you to hold on to that idea of surrender, because I would argue that one of the biggest driving forces of this cycle is surrender. It's the hero learning to let go and go inward, become vulnerable. They're going to get up. They're going to lose battles. They're going to win battles.
And ask for help.
And ask for help. Mm-hmm. Definitely keep that one in mind, guys. I think for the sake of time, we could get into the stages. Unless anybody has maybe one final comment that they wanted to throw in there.
Well, I do want to make sure that we acknowledge the chat. Tori wrote in the chat that the chart reminds Tori of a light bulb, and Ciel wrote that it kind of reminds Ciel of an astrology chart. And I also kind of wanted to just throw in there that many, many years ago, when I created this diagram for a previous lesson on the hero's journey, I very specifically created it to take the shape of a light bulb. Because if we think about the death and rebirth as the lowest point of the hero's journey, that's when the hero is at their lowest. I mean, they're like on the verge of not continuing the journey. I wanted to really reinforce that visually to say, that is the moment where their life essentially changes completely, and they find the strength to dig themselves out of that hole to then continue in the journey. So that death and rebirth is extremely, extremely important, which is what a lot of you have already said. It's that cyclical part of change, right? So it's not by accident that it looks like a light bulb.
And apologies, guys, if I've been overlooking the chat. I'm just trying to multitask and keep us on track here. So I don't mean to ignore those comments, and thank you, Luis, for helping me catch them. And yeah, if you feel comfortable enough, if you want to elaborate a little on, your interpretation of seeing an astrology chart in there, I think that's fascinating. I can definitely see a parallel, but if you want to take the floor and speak to that, you don't have to. You let us know. Do you feel like you want to share on that, expand on it a little?
I can.
Okay, awesome.
So in a chart, there's 12 houses. And the first chart is associated with kind of like self, and some could say like the birth. And then there's an 8th house that's associated with death and rebirth. And so that's kind of what it reminded me of.
Definitely. And the whole idea of destiny, if astrology charts are meant to show people what their destinies are according to the stars, we can think of the hero's journey as maybe playing a similar role or similar function as kind of charting out one's destiny according to these archetypal phases that Campbell theorized exist in every culture, or that he saw in every culture. It's kind of the phases that shape the destiny of a hero. So yeah, I love that connection. I see it, as having to do with destiny, who a person will ultimately become, who they're destined to become, according to the stars or according to the patterns of their culture and the stories that their culture tells. All right, guys. Folks, let's see. There it goes. A little bit stubborn. Let's get into it. Get into the steps. There's quite a bit of ground to cover, but I'll do this as concisely as I can and, guide us through it. Just a little more here. The theory behind the name Monomyth is, you'll hear that one thrown around, especially if you guys want to explore this later on your own. It's just another fancy term that comes from the notion that the hero's journey represents the ultimate narrative archetype that recurs throughout the world's cultures. And you guys have probably been hearing me say some version of this as we've been moving. That's all it is. The Monomyth. That's the hero's journey. And it's helpful to think of it as an organizing tool for helping us build a simple narrative trajectory, and just like trajectories from start to finish, points A through Z, A, B, C, D. What are the little steps that my character is going to take in order to actualize themselves, to attain that hero status? What kind of challenges they have to go through when we're thinking about our own writing, whether that's for novels, scripts, plays, or even memoirs. The hero's journey is a fantastic tool to help you kind of start getting into a mindset where you're thinking about structural principles for your writing, organization, just tools, just training wheels. You don't have to be married to these things at all, or you don't have to be overly committed to them, because it's only there to help guide you in the way that you would learn a martial art or in the way that you would learn to paint. Once you learn it, you can totally break it. You don't have to depend on it forever, but you can always keep coming back to it. And the point of it is to master, like I said, eventually break it and find your own style. And so if you were to, pick up a Campbell's book, you would see that it's 17 steps, very detailed, very esoteric. And you could spend hours kind of playing with it and reading the book. But for our purposes here, we're all learning. A lot of us may just be starting out with some of these ideas and concepts. Totally valid. Everybody starts somewhere, right? It's 12 steps. I've simplified it to the best of my ability just to make it easier, more relatable, especially if you're not like a Jungian psychologist. You spend all day reading these types of books and familiar with that terminology. 12 steps is just fine to get us started. So step number 1, well, in order to have a hero's journey, you need a hero, or you need someone who's an acolyte, someone who's just starting out, a newbie, a novice, who is destined to become a hero, or who chooses to become a hero. The chosen one, he chooses them, or they step up. It's typically responsible for the fate of a group of people, like I was saying earlier. It could be their family, their tribe, their colleagues, their race. There's many ways to kind of interpret that, but essentially what's going on in that very first step, the zero phase, maybe is another way to put it, is you have someone who's a part of a community that's in danger, that's facing a threat, that is starving, that is being eradicated, or that's being hurt somehow. They need help. and somebody in that community or multiple people step up, or fate chooses them one way or another. That's how we get started. How we get our hero. And they usually have some sort of trait or skill that sets them apart. But, this is the standard. But I would also say, and this is my own little input, it doesn't have to be a special trait or skill. It could be. But there's even the weakest among us, or those who are perceived as weak, right, or inferior, like the hobbits in Lord of the Rings, the smallest, most meekest race of beings in that world were ultimately the ones who destroyed the evil ring of power. Frodo, I don't know if you guys have seen Lord of the Rings, but basically the hobbits are kind of considered, the most peaceful race, but they're also the weakest. They're little, they're seen as children. They don't have special powers. They're not wizards. They're not elves. They're not strong. They're not warriors. But the main character in the trilogy of the Lord of the Rings, Fellowship, Two Towers, Return of the King, Frodo, and his faithful companion Sam, they're both hobbits, and they take that ring to Mount Doom, and they destroy the evil ring that was oppressing the world, in a nutshell. But anyways, I have an example here for the first step. Is I hope folks are more or less familiar with Star Wars. If not, we could work through this. But you got Luke Skywalker, and he's the last surviving heir of the Jedi, who, upon mastering the ways of the Force, his destiny, as his hero's journey, is to resurrect that fallen order that was wiped out. So the journey is typically a circular one, as we saw. It's a cycle también, meaning it ends where it begins, a full round of the circle. But by the end, as we've been discussing, the hero or heroine has undergone a powerful transformation that leaves them changed forever. And just to kind of put a bow on that, the hero's journey has three main phases: departure, initiation, and return. And those, for the most part, they kind of are what their name implies they are. Departure, the hero takes off for a journey. When you go to the airport, you go into departures. The initiation, that one might be a little more esoteric. It might be a little more just ambiguous. Initiation is, anybody want to comment on that? What you think phase 2 might mean, the initiation?
Them going through the fire.
Or the surrendering part.
Surrender, yes. You got to surrender in order to be...
Sort of like joining a club. Like suddenly you're in something that you are unfamiliar with, and people make you more familiar with it.
Yeah, bingo. And the surrender is a part of that, right? It's like you have your own identity, you're your own person. Then you meet a group of people or your mentor who's a totally different person, and you got to get to know him before you trust him to surrender, right? Like, who's this person showing up in my life? But that is initiation in a nutshell. You're surrendering to people you trust who are going to help shape you into a new person. Initiation, a rite of initiation, like a ritual. And that's why
you get jumped in. You get jumped in the barrio. You get jumped in.
If you wanna, yeah. That's
damn, doctor, echando barrio. Wow.
Thug life. What? Vale.
It's
That's a culture
part of the
too.
barrio rituals.
It's
Yeah.
true. You can't.
Yes. Yeah. You know what? That's why it's universal. It exists in many different types of cultures. And then the return. We come back. Okay, but so in the hero's journey, we start off in the known world, your familiar settings, where you grew up, your hometown, the school that you've been going to since you were in elementary, qué sé yo, known world, known setting is the main idea. What you're used to every day, your everyday world. And then before accepting the call of fate, which takes many forms, that calls us into a new world full of danger, before we do that, it's just our known world. We're comfortable. We don't even know what's coming if we're the hero. We're just chilling. We're just hanging out. We don't even expect or assume that we have this great destiny or this great potential within us. Eventually, we're going to get thrown into the unknown world full of danger and forces that the hero's going to have to face in order to discover their true potential or use their skills in new and demanding ways. Phase 2 is the call to adventure. Here's where we really get cooking, where it gets started, where, oh man, it just got real. I'm going to have a baby soon. I'm going to have my first baby just from my own personal life. And that to me is a new hero's journey. Like, caray, that's the call to adventure. And it's coming, you know? So it's just that sense, you sense something, either in fiction or in real life. You get the sense that something big is coming. You know, there's a storm out there looming and it's coming, or there's just a force. It doesn't have to be something bad. It's just something you feel that something big is on its way, and the world seems to be speaking to you through omens, through signs. So the call to adventure, make it a little less esoteric, is an event or it's an action that disrupts the hero's everyday life and becomes an opportunity to leave their known world. Something happens. You know, the kid from the barrio gets a scholarship to Harvard. Oh man, hijo de su madre, I'm going to a whole new world. One that I don't know, that I've never been to, and I'm going to have to learn how to talk the talk, how to walk the walk in this new setting. That's the call to adventure. Is the kid going to decide to leave behind his old world, you know, for the promise of a new world and something different? Or is he going to stay behind? We don't know. The hero often resists to that point, or outright rejects it and says, that's not for me, because they're afraid, understandably afraid, or there's feelings of unworthiness or feeling bound by personal obligation to remain home. You know, the kid from the barrio might decide, damn, chales, you know, if I go to Harvard, who's going to take care of my parents? I can't go. But it takes many different forms. Then, you know, the parents might say, hijo, you got to go. Don't worry about us. We're going to be okay. And eventually they convince their child to go in spite of that painful separation.
Damn, Sam.
Anyone else?
I feel like you're calling me out right now.
Oh, nah.
That's what happened to me.
Unintentional.
Me too.
But it's, I mean, but Sam is right. You know, it can be usually I guess depending on your story, right? But it can usually be a moment in a person's life or in a character's life where they're just not ready and they feel obligated to hold on to something in their past, right? So their status quo, what they're very familiar with, that is what's really, you know, being challenged when it comes to the call to adventure.
And guys, I do mean to maybe, you know, bring in more pauses so that we can get folks to coming in, but I see that we're hitting 7:30 and there is a lot of material to cover. If y'all would just permit me to just kind of just go through these, and once we're done covering the 12 steps, if folks want to then chime in, kind of share your responses, I would greatly appreciate it. I just want to, there's just so much with the 12 steps that I appreciate it. And I just really want to hear your responses to this. I'm just going to cover it for the sake of time. I wish, you know, we could have a whole other hour. But ahí les va. Just meeting the mentor, supernatural aid. In this state, hero meets or rejoins a powerful, oftentimes it is a supernatural mentor, but it just depends on the story that you're telling or that you're reading. It doesn't always have to be Obi-Wan, a Jedi. It could just be a regular person, you know, the teacher that makes the difference for the kid who's struggling. I like the stories when they do kind of cross over beyond the veil of reality, but, you know, to everyone has their own cup of tea, their own shot of tequila. Okay, so that mentor is going to give them a valuable gift for the journey ahead, or they're going to teach them how to use their talent, their skill, or their ability. You know, if we go back to Star Wars real quick, porque soy muy nerd y me gusta eso. Luke meets Obi-Wan Kenobi, who was one of the very last of the Jedi that survived the Jedi Purge. And Luke doesn't know he's a Jedi. Luke doesn't know that he is the child of a Jedi, and he doesn't know that Obi-Wan is one of these last surviving people. And that becomes his spiritual mentor who's going to teach him how to tap into that inner power. And then also we can see it in the new Star Wars trilogy. Rey, she doesn't know that she is connected to the Force and has this great inner potential to do, you know, incredible things in these abilities. But eventually she meets the mentor. She actually does meet Luke, and he comes back and is her mentor and kind of helps her unlock it a little bit. Okay, but don't want to belabor that too much. The fourth step, crossing the threshold. Here, we're going from the known world, everything we know, it's that first top part of the circle. That's the whole known world, everything that's above ground, everything that's familiar to us that feels safe. When we're at step number 4 and we're crossing the threshold is an interesting word. The etymology, it's a doorway. The etymology is basically telling you it's a doorway, a threshold, something that you pass through, and it's going to close behind you once you pass through. So that's all about it's literal and it's metaphorical. It's a gateway into a new life of danger, adversity, and adventure. And once we cross it, we leave that everyday life. Bye-bye. The kid goes to Harvard, and then he doesn't know what's going to come next. Sometimes the hero has to contend. Sometimes, this is a fine point. Sometimes the hero will have to contend with a gateway guardian in order to cross over successfully from their old life into a new one. And that's leading us into the initiation. We're getting pretty close to the initiation here. We met the mentor, someone who's bringing us in to this like secret society, so to speak, or exclusive society where we're going to learn our abilities. If you're a young witch or wizard, you know, then you've met Hagrid and he's going to take you to Hogwarts and you're going to start learning how to conjure and do your spells. But before we get there, sometimes there is a guardian. If you guys like playing video games like I do, it's like that first mini boss that you have to fight, and if you don't beat him, you're not going to get to the next world, the next level. But crossing the threshold, that door that's going to close behind you and it's not going to open back up till you're done completing the cycle, leads us into the initiation phase. Here, Luke is starting to get trained by Obi-Wan. He's starting to become a Jedi. You know, young Harry Potter is starting to learn wizardry. Let's see. Does anyone want to, at this point, you know, I want to give a chance. Does anyone want to offer an example of crossing the threshold as you guys understand it so far, leaving the known world and entering into the unknown? Anybody? Just if you want to share from your own life, cool, no pressure. If you want to share maybe from that story that folks are talking about, Daughter of Fortune by Isabel Allende. I haven't read that particular Allende book, but if y'all want to try and identify, you know, what is the point in that story where the protagonist leaves her known world into the unknown and there's no turning back? El que se atreva, you know. It's all for, you know, just learning here. Todo se vale. Okay, that's all right, guys. No worries. No.
I'm going to speak to my own thing.
Yeah,
sorry,
go for it.
This will be my mini therapy session. I'm joking. Listen, no, my eldest left to the Air Force and did all that, but it was very new to me. You know, he was my first son, and to tell him his whole life to follow his dreams and I'll support him no matter what, to having to let him follow his dreams and support him no matter what was two different things, you know? So to allow myself to surrender to that, this is how I raised him to be, and that I would have his back took a lot. So I guess it's not his hero journey, but mine, and just being the type of mom that I set out to be 18 years ago, you know, to love my child unconditionally and support him and do it with like a brave face, you know. That was really hard to do. But it was like where the rubber meets the road, where I had to be everything I said I would be, not thinking that was what that was the scenario that I had to prove that I could do that. If that makes sense. I don't know if
that makes sense.
fun,
that makes sense. You know what? That's very heroic. The mother's journey is a beautiful example of the hero's journey or of the heroine's journey. And it's like an initiation for the both of you. You're going into a new phase where, you know, you've sent your child out into the world to do their own thing and go on their own quest. And that's something new for you. And it's also something new for your child, because they're leaving behind their known world, which you were a part of, to take on a new journey in a new place.
Yeah, so not make them feel guilty or anything like that. Like, why are you leaving? Or, you know, just being like, oh, like, oh.
Yeah.
But yeah. So
thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. Okay, let's do it. To kind of let off a little steam there's a lot of stuff. I hope it's not too much information. Number 5 is the road of trials. In this stage, the hero begins to experience a multitude of trials and tests that pit him against the dangers of the unknown world. You know, if you allow me, Jessica, just an example, you know, your child going onto the world, que Dios lo bendiga, you know, they're going to do it because everybody eventually reaches a stage where they have to face the world. They have to go out there and they have to see who they are. You know, we all go through that stage. It's an initiation para todos. You know, if you're going to become an adult, It's scary, but you have to pass the threshold and eventually start, living your own life. Jalar las propias riendas de tu vida. So that road of trials, and I'll throw it back on myself. Going to college, that or just going to college, going to another country, moving to another state. Could be any of us. That's a road of trials. You don't know what kind of challenges you're going to face once you leave your known world. And there's going to be tests that pit you against uncertainty. It doesn't always have to be danger. In real life, the world is dangerous, but there's also, more everyday things, just practical things. You're going to have enough money? What kind of job are you going to work in this new place you're living in, new city? And the whole purpose of those challenges in the hero's journey is to expose the hero to new allies. And it goes back to what we've been talking about. There's always going to be help. We don't go through this world alone. There's other people. You can make friends. You can strengthen yourself by building community. It's what we have here in this space. We are allies. We are a community, that are helping each other learn and grow on our shared writer journeys. You might make enemies, you can't love everybody, I guess, or you can't get along with it. You can't expect to get along with everybody. Todos tienen diferencias. And sometimes there's just bad folks out there you got to watch out for. And predicaments. There's different predicaments you could run into. Oh, damn, I ran out of money, for groceries this week. What do I do? It's the road of trials. It's a student off to college in their first year and they didn't accept enough financial aid, or damn, they didn't get enough financial aid and they got to get a job, and that's how they pay for their groceries. Many different roads of trials exist for people of all walks of life. Let's go into new skills acquired. That's a quick and easy one. It's just, okay, we've gone through our road of trials. Different things have happened to us. We've met new allies. The kid from the barrio is now at Harvard. They've suffered through a horrible first semester where they felt alone. They're depressed. What's going on? Híjoles, the classes are tough. But by the end of it, they kind of were able to slow down a little bit, get themselves some therapy on campus through the, school psychologist. They met a new community of people who like to play soccer. Now they have a club of friends and they're a little more stable now. They have their allies, they have their community. They may have found a mentor on campus who's maybe came from a barrio themselves and is guiding them and developing as, a great student. New skills acquired. That kid from the barrio learned how to succeed at Harvard. They learned what they needed to do in order to do well in the classes, and they learned what they needed to do to take care of themselves. Oh man, I need a club of buddies, of people I can hang out with who understand my culture and my background so that I can make it here. And that's skills too. How to form those relationships, how to succeed in the new environment. Number 7, and rebirth. Here, and this is one of the really big ones. They're all important, but this one in particular, because this is when we start getting into shedding the old self, or like a snake skin, shedding that old skin and becoming a new being, or just a new version of yourself. We don't want to take it that far, tampoco. The hero experiences a metaphorical death and rebirth. They face their greatest fear in the heart of the unknown world. This is a bit of a technical term here, but I think it's a useful one. And I really made a great effort not to include too many of these, just the most important ones. But it's the idea of what's called the innermost cave, which is kind of a psychological concept. It's a mental space, this innermost cave, where you're at one of your lowest points. You're in a scary place. We could take the kid from the barrio in his first semester at Harvard. He's terrified. Damn, I don't understand these people. This is a culture shock. I feel alone here. I don't even feel like a person. They don't respect me. I don't feel respected by the professors. I don't feel respected by the student body. I feel like I'm the only one of my kind here. That kid is so terrified and stressed out, they retreat into themselves. That's the innermost cave. You shell up, basically. You're like a little turtle and you go into your shell. That's the innermost cave. Just in a very concise and direct way to put it. And that's in phase 7, the death and rebirth. You kind of die a little bit. That poor kid, he's just overwhelmed, or she's overwhelmed by this new environment, and he or she retreats into themselves because it's overwhelming. And I'm sure that, it's a shared human experience we've got going on. Everyone has experienced a moment like that where you're just overwhelmed by a new environment. You're like, caray, I don't belong here, or I'm terrified of this place and these people. And you shrink back. You're retreating into your innermost cave so that you die, in a sense. It's a struggle. You're trying to psychologically adapt to the new place. And that psychological adaptation that you make in order to survive in this new environment where you got culture shock or you don't know how to relate to people because they're so different from you, that's the rebirth. Is you're paying attention on what's going on in here. The hero in that moment is paying attention to, oh my gosh, what are my fears? Oh shit, this is the thing that I'm most afraid of. How am I going to face it? And it's a physical and psychological place. It's Harvard for the barrio kid, and it's also the kid's fears about being in such a prestigious place, coming from the very humble, modest, working class community he came from. And that tends to be where the climax of the journey takes place. That's the heart of the drama right there. Oh man, is the kid going to make it or is he going to break it? The death is the result of having to shed the former self, the values, the ideas you had, certain personality traits, in order to emerge victorious from that innermost cave. In order to get out alive, the kid has to unlearn maybe some things that he thought about the world and expand his mentality. You know what? I do belong here. I may be from a marginalized community and I may have never had the kind of resources and experiences that these other elite kids had, but I am worth it. I deserve to be here. And that's when that strength emerges. The strength of the rebirth is psychological energy that helps that young kid make it through, to find the wherewithal, the strength, las ganas, to find out what he needs to do in order to succeed there. And then he becomes a brilliant scholar athlete, for example. He becomes a new version of himself, or she becomes a new version of herself and becomes the scholar athlete, or whatever version of their empowered self that form takes. Could be a musician. The person decides, he or she decides that, you know what, their talent is music, and they find the Harvard music program and they become the best dang, violinist in their first chair. And then their parents come, the following year for the winter performance. And ahí está mi hija, ahí está mi hijo, first chair with the violin, the winter orchestra. It's the rebirth. You went from being a barrio kid to being first chair at Harvard's, musical orchestra. Revelation, stage number 8. The hero finally realizes who they need to be in order to completely fulfill their quest. They often receive a helpful gift around this point to help them advance in their journey. Armed with that knowledge, the hero becomes ready for the most dangerous part of the journey. Atonement, the hero, having attained a great victory in their journey at this point, strives to return to some version of their known familiar world. However, because they've been fundamentally changed in the death and rebirth phase, they can't just leave the world as it is. So they decide to overcome this feeling of tension between wanting to return to their old lives and wanting to continue fixing the world by atoning for the mistakes they may have made during the first phase of the journey. What does all of that mean? I'll just keep using this example as I think, it's working. The barrio kid, him or her, they've realized that, their talent is in being this brilliant musician in, the musicology department at Harvard. And they're having a great time doing it. They're getting recognized. They feel like they finally found their community. And they kind of feel guilty, though, because it's going well for them. But then they notice, some freshmen coming in. They're already like a junior at this point, maybe. And they see these little lonely Latino freshmen, other barrio kids like themselves, who are also struggling, but there's no program to support them. So what do? Damn, you know what? It's working out for me, but something in my conscience just doesn't let me, go back home for the summer and just chill. I need to do something. I need to be a part of something more that creates lasting change. So what does that kid do? Él o ella? They decide to start a leadership program for these freshmen Latino students come in who have never had anyone to help them. They haven't even found their mentor yet. So that kid, the first generation one, the one who came to Harvard and had all the difficult trials, decides to start something like that up. And then they become the mentor for the next generation of kids coming into Harvard. That's the atonement, is guilt, that sense that you've made it, it's working out for you, but what more can I do? I can't just leave the world as it is. And that's what's starting to make them the true hero or heroine. Someone who not only thinks about themselves, but remembers, oh snap, I got a whole community that I'm a part of that all of this is for. It's not just for me. I'm trying to do this to better the world, to help my community, to help the folks who are starving, to help the folks who are suffering, my community that I've left who raised me. Number 10, hero is given a sacred gift to help them complete their journey. Can be a physical gift or a form of enlightenment that helps them turn the tide in the final battle. And in our extended metaphor here, the allegory of this barrio kid going to Harvard and discovering their passion in music, first chair violin, maybe the dean of the school starts noticing that and decides, you know what, this kid is doing some great work for the university and supporting this Latino community coming into Harvard. I'm going to give you a grant. Here's $100,000 to help your program. A sacred gift to help them. It could be a physical gift like the money, or a form of enlightenment, that helps them turn the tide. They realize, I can make a true difference here. I'm enlightened now. I want to create a pathway for my community in order to create better outcomes for the rest of my people back home. 11 is the resurrection. That's the hero's final battle with the dangers of the unknown world. In finding victory over this ultimate evil that can take many forms, or an adversary, the hero definitively becomes who they're meant to be, and they ensure the safety of their people. That can take many forms. If we want to keep going with our example of the barrio kid who's made it so far in Harvard, maybe there's another member of the administration that says, you know what, Dean, I know you want to give these kids $100,000, but for next year, we're going to cut it to $10,000 or zero. And then, if you wanted to turn that into like a little film or script, that's kind of the evil adversary coming in and trying to push it back and say, oh, we don't need any more of these diverse students. Studies have shown that doesn't really help the school and it doesn't really help them, blah, 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 whatever, BS arguments they might throw. And then the kid, though, having faced all these dangers and become really eloquent and a great leader, has all of these different connections to various staff at the school, and maybe even a local senator that comes in and pushes back and says, no, Mr. Administrator, you're not going to take away the funding for this program. It's very much needed because Harvard values diversity. Harvard values restorative justice. Harvard values social justice. Bam. And then the road back. Having achieved their goal, in this case, the hero manages to reach out to the local senator. The hero gets all of their little chess pieces lined up. I'm talking to the anthropology professors who had my back, the ethnomusicology professor who saw the talent in me. All these people wrote letters for me to, battle the administration and just prevent them from taking the funding away. They've achieved their goal. The hero crosses back over the threshold and into their old, familiar, everyday world. That part of the quest showcases the hero's full transformation. Now they're a strong leader. Él o ella, and the safety of those they love. Now their community gets to enjoy that path. And sometimes it requires the hero, now transformed, to find a new normal. They finally chill. They're a senior. They graduated from Harvard with honors. Back in the community now because they want to start a music program there. But they got to find a new normal. It's like they've learned so many things and they've grown so much. They have to find a way to go back to the community and maybe find a space for themselves that makes sense. It's their community. It's going to welcome them, but doing it in a way that's organic, that makes sense, that's ethical, toda la cosa. It's just finding a new normal because they're no longer the barrio kid that they left their community as. Now they're a badass. They're a leader. And they're going to bring that back with them, back into their community. So there's kind of a negotiation there at the very end. What am I going to look like now that I've achieved so much in my community? How can I be an ethical leader? How can I come back to my people and exist as I am in this community? What does that look like? And that's different for every hero. We don't have too much time left, guys. I apologize as this was a lot of stuff, but there is the heroine's journey. I'll condense it, but the first narrative alternative to Campbell's hero's journey was developed by one of his students, Maureen Murdock, in the 1980s, because she believed the hero's journey didn't adequately address the psycho-spiritual journey of women. Completely valid. Because there's many different ways you can analyze the hero's journey. And honestly, it does show universal patterns of culture, but It didn't really say much about women's journeys. So what's up with that? So then Maureen Murdock says that, and she's one of his students, and she's like, you know what, I'm gonna come up with my own. And then we've got the heroine separates from the feminine. The feminine's often a mother figure, a mentor, or socially prescribed feminine outsider role. 2 is identification with the masculine and the gathering of allies. The heroine embraces a new way of life, often involving choosing a path that is different from her prescribed role in society, gearing up to fight an organization, role, or group that is limiting her life options, or entering some masculine dominant identity defined sphere. 3 is the road of trials. Some of these are similar to the hero's journey, and meeting ogres and dragons. That's the dragons you got to slay. The heroine encounters the trials, meets people who try to dissuade her from pursuing her chosen path or who want to destroy her. Híjoles. Experiencing the boon of success, she overcomes the obstacles in her way. That's typically where the hero's journey ends, by the way, but the heroine continues, awakens to feelings of spiritual death. The heroine's new way of life is too limited, and the success in the new way of life is either temporary, illusory, shallow, or requires a betrayal of herself over time. Number 6, initiation and descent to the goddess. The heroine faces a crisis of some sort in which the new way of life is not enough. And the heroine falls into despair, and all of the masculine dominant group strategies have failed her. The heroine urgently yearns to connect with the feminine. Well, she wants to, but she's unable to return to that initial limited state or position. Then there's 8, the daughter split, where some of their initial values, skills, or attributes, or others like them, are reclaimed, but now these traits from a new perspective. Number 9, the heroine heals the wounded masculine within. The heroine makes peace with the masculine approach to the world as it applies to them. 10, the heroine integrates the masculine and the femme. In order to face the world and future with a new understanding of herself and the world and life, the heroine integrates the masculine and the feminine qualities perspectives. That permits the heroine to see through the binaries and to interact with a complex world that includes the heroine, but is also larger than their personal lifetime or cultural milieu. Anyways, okay. There's a lot of jargon there, but essentially, Maureen Murdock showed her version to Campbell, and it's reported that this is what he said. Women don't need to make the journey. In the whole mythological journey, the woman is there. All she has to do is realize that she's the place that people are trying to get to. Híjoles, yes, I can see. Does anyone want to respond to that really quick before I kind of go in a little bit on that? Is what? We got to keep in mind, I'm not excusing these guys. It's a product. He's a product of his time. We're talking about an older white man from the 1940s, 1949. The perspective is going to be limited. To say the least. Well, Maureen Murdock said, to hell with that. I'm going to write myself into this field. I'm going to make a space for myself, as she rightfully did. And that's why it's important not to accept the hero's journey as gospel truth. And we don't need to worship these figures. We can appreciate them for the ideas they come up with, but everyone is a product of their time. And even Maureen Murdock, for that matter, we can certainly say that she made a great contribution for contesting patriarchal attitudes and paradigms around the hero's journey for those times. But her model still isn't the end-all be-all for women's stories or journeys. It's merely one version or interpretation. That's the key takeaway here. Everybody's going to have their own version or interpretation. None of these codified ideas, this is what I recommend, should be taken as gospel truth. They're helpful tools. Nada más. Helpful tools. The hero and heroine's journeys are based on traditional dichotomies of gendered experience as metaphors for things such as spirituality, seen as the feminine, and the physical world, seen as the masculine. But these are just metaphors. There are plenty of fictional and real-life stories that don't adhere to these notions around gender norms, because life is way more complicated than that. Many different kinds of fictional and real people out there who don't follow these neat, clear-cut trajectories. And just for the sake of time, that's what I got. There's plenty of stories that do not follow the typical hero or heroine's journey. I invite you guys to check them out. Avatar, The Legend of Korra is a great one. My wife introduced me to that one. I'm like, oh yeah, she's, a heroine. She's a female protagonist, but she doesn't follow the hero or heroine's journey. She kind of does her own thing. And I'm like, oh wow, that's miraculous writing. it defies a lot of these tropes, and it's compelling. The Umbrella Academy is another cool one. The Last of Us is a great show too, based on a video game that defies kind of like expectations of the hero and heroine's journeys. Xena Warrior Princess, another one that's awesome. The Epic of Gilgamesh, if you're a nerd like me and you like old mythology, that's the world's oldest written myth. And it doesn't make much sense if we look at it through the hero's journey lens. Like, it goes all over the place. So that's just to say that there's more than these two guys. And just they're very useful tools. We can be grateful for Maureen Murdock for the stride that she made in expanding it out. At the end of the day, you have the power because only you know what your hero's journey is, what your personal myth is, and all the baggage you bring with it. So pick and choose what you want from them. They are not gospel truth and they shouldn't be set in stone. And guys, for the homework, I just as a basic template, take the hero and heroine's journey because we're still using it, it's still useful, and just write a 1 to 2 paragraph synopsis of the movie of my life, let's call it, your lives. You know, think of it as a film where you're the protagonist, you're the hero or heroine, and we're the audience. You know, me and Luis and Abraham and everybody you're sending it to, we're your audience. You know, we're flipping through Netflix and we want to watch the story of your life. Focus on the call to adventure moment in your life, give that one the most attention, and then just leave us wanting to read more. Y con eso es todo, estimados estudiantes. It's been a pleasure. If anyone has any last comments they want to make, I'm all ears. La palabra, tienen la palabra.
I think it's important to note that these are not like special, like this is the formula to create this and that, either for him or for her. They're actually people who are looking into all the stories and basically studying it and realizing that they have similarities. It's not like they created the formula; they just saw it and they just basically created the the guide of like, oh, this is how they all kind of constructed, but they all like come from different places. They have different themes and different variations, and so don't feel like this is the way, right? Like Sam's saying.
Thank you, Abraham.
Abraham, could you say that in a different way again, please? Because I didn't totally get what you said.
Okay, so this is not like Campbell invented the story of the hero's journey or the other one for the heroine's journey, right? Both of them are actually looking to all the stories that are being written. Like Louis said, maybe Campbell started studying more like men guided stories and history. And that's how they start noticing all these patterns and all these characters and all these trials. And so that's how we end up with this. But this is not the formula of like, oh, all these stories are these or have to be these, or this is the way you should write it. This is just basically an observation from both of them. Okay, so you can write your own stories and don't feel like you have to follow all these things, right? The good thing is it's good to learn them and see what you like, what you think is useful, and in no means is this like, oh, this is the formula to create your story. No, it's just things to point out the notice that other people have used in the past and that are effective and they are basically a reflection on society in itself, right? So that's what I'm going at. Any questions, Julie?
No, that's good. Thank you.
Okay, not at all.
Definitely. I mean, potentially all of us could come up with our own phases. I mean, if you really studied your life and all of these stories, you could theorize your own version of the hero's journey and codify it todo and see where it goes. But the point is that we're all going to have our own unique outlook because we all live very different lives. Even folks in the same community. Your hero's journeys may look similar, but are going to be very different by virtue of the fact that you inhabit your own skin. No one else does. And you're going to have your own problems and your own struggles. Similar ones to others, but your own and unique nonetheless. And that's why there's the theory of everyone having their own personal myth. Your very life itself is your own personal myth. And where you take it depends on the choices you make, is going to result in something unique. And, what Campbell and Murdock did is they studied all of these myths and stories from throughout history and from different world cultures, and they synthesized it and turned it into this, very, readily available structure to study. But also filtered through their own perspectives. Older white man, older white woman. Well, where's there room for everybody else's voices? That's the key takeaway. The point I'm trying to make is your perspective is unique as well, and the way that you're going to consume the hero's journey structure, you're going to filter it through your own unique lens. It's going to become something unique by virtue of it passing through you.
Thank you, Sam, for the that was a deep lecture. But thank you very, very much.
Quick one. There you go, Luis. Yeah. Okay, he answered the question on the chat. So download the file that Luis provided if you want the chart, like the light bulb chart.
Yeah, the handout was just uploaded to our chat on Zoom, so you can download it there. It was also uploaded to our Google Class, so you can go to Google Classroom and download it there as well. And then this recording will also be uploaded to YouTube, and it will be then shared on Google Classroom along with the handout too. So you'll have multiple opportunities to download the handout and have that little chart to maybe help you as you think about how, the hero's journey applies to your life or to your storytelling style. But very importantly, remember, this theory is just that. It's a theory. It's not set in stone. There's a lot of different ways in which we can interpret the development of identity and the development of a person, including through, other models like the heroine's journey. But if you do want to see some of these actually in action and you have maybe time over the weekend to, say, watch a movie, I strongly, strongly, strongly recommend that if you want to find a good example of the heroine's journey, you watch the Disney animated Mulan movie. Mulan is, I think, at least in my opinion, one of the best examples of the heroine's journey put into action. Whereas if you want to, stay with kind of like the children's films, you could probably watch Toy Story, the very first Toy Story, and you will see the hero's journey as lived by Woody. So those would be two very good examples of both of these theories in action. Or also The Incredibles, too. Pixar is very good at using the hero's journey. Or The Lion King, that's right. The Lion King, by the way, is based on, I believe, Shakespearean plays. So, there's a whole world of examples of these theories in action in literature and film and even in other forms of art. So, but again, to answer some of the questions in the chat for everyone to know, this particular little synopsis of the movie of your life is due on Friday, this upcoming Friday, so that we can have enough time to review it and give you feedback on Tuesday of next week. Next Tuesday will be a workshop session. We'll break out into our cohorts using the breakout rooms in Zoom. And we just hope that everybody has an opportunity to read the work in advance and come prepared to have some fruitful discussions. And aside from that, if you have any, questions or if you have any challenges using Google Docs, you can always look up the tutorials. You can also watch the last video of the lessons. I believe I did record that part of the using Google Docs. If not, you can reach out to us directly, any one of us, either myself, Abraham, or Sam, and we're more than happy to help you share your work with your cohort. And aside from that, I want to say, again, thank you. Shout out to Sam for putting in all the work to, put together this particular handout, this presentation. I'm really happy that, we were able to have this particular discussion, because I think that this is going to help all of you as you think about your life's paths and the way that your poetry and your writing will hopefully develop for this upcoming zine that is, of course, themed Los Caminos de la Vida, or life's paths. With that, I'll leave it for any additional questions. If any one of you is already needing to log out, you're welcome to log out. It is past 8. There you go, Sam.
Thank you, Sam. Just want to say thank you, Sam, for the presentation. It was quite in depth. So thank you so much. A lot of your examples were really helpful. Thank you.
I appreciate that.
So I suppose with that, we'll go ahead and say good night. I hope you all enjoy the rest of your week. Stay cool, stay hydrated, and have fun with this. This particular exercise, I think, is going to be a really, really fun, simple way for you to reflect on life's paths. So, ahí nos vemos. Que se la pasen muy bien. We'll see you all soon. Take care, everybody.